All right, guys, welcome back to another video. My name is CFI Munden. If you guys like this type of content, you guys want to see more, if you can leave a like and subscribe, it would help a lot. It only takes a second. I'd appreciate that a lot. So Jason sent me this video of him a couple days ago, and he sent me an email. By the way, guys, my email is cfimunden@gmail.com. You guys can email whatever you want, questions, comments, concerns, videos, whatever. And he sends me this video and he's like, hey, this was my in-flight emergency, happened about 6 years ago. Can I get some constructive criticism? What are some things that I could have done better? How did I handle this situation? And he says he passed it off to his CFI, and his CFI was just like, oh, you did all right. And in my head, I'm just thinking, if my student had an emergency and he came out of it unscathed and the plane came back not totaled or damaged or in a field somewhere, like, you did a lot better than all right. You did pretty damn good if you were able to make it back down safely. So yeah, he has an in-flight emergency, pretty low to the ground. He's practicing low-level maneuvers, which generally take place around 600 to 1,000 feet above the ground. He's doing S-turns. He loses an engine, goes through the recovery process, which we'll talk about, and then he actually diagnoses the problem at the end. He figures out why this happened. And yeah, let's go through this together. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention he only has 54 hours. He's still a student pilot. Okay, and then he gets it started again. So for those of you guys who are not a pilot, or if you are, let's go ahead and take a step. We'll break this into two pieces, okay? So it's the emergency with the recovery, and then we'll go to the end, and then he'll give you the diagnosis. So if we come back to the actual engine out, he runs through an emergency process right here. And let's see, let's go back just a little bit more, fixing practice S-turns, and then it looks like the engine goes out here. So when we get an engine out, the first thing that I always teach my students is ABCs. So let's say you and I are flying along and all of a sudden we get engine sputtering and then the prop stops spinning, which, by the way, a lot of these like loss of engine power emergencies or loss of engine power, power plant failure, whatever. In my experience, I've only had one so far, but talking to like more experienced pilots, it's generally a snowball effect where one system will go wrong or you'll get a few hints, and then a couple of seconds later, 5, 10, 15 seconds later, the problem will be exacerbated and then the prop fails or it'll barely be working. It's never just like oh, boom, your engine's out. You know what I mean? I feel like that's pretty rare that does happen, but I feel like it's more often than not, like, it's a snowball effect, right? It's a domino effect when it comes to these systems. So the first thing, if you get any suspicious engine roughness or idling and loss of engine power, I always teach my students ABCs. So airspeed first, okay? First thing you should be doing is pitching for that best glide. Best glide, and then best place to land. So your eyes should be looking in two places. You should be looking at the GPS first to see if there's any airports around you that are within glide distance. Now, he doesn't have a lot of time at all. He's only 1,000 feet AGL, and a glide rate of like 60 knots. I mean, you're going to be on the ground in like 30 seconds to a minute. All right, so airspeed, best place to land, checklist. Now, when you're short on time like this, you only have 30 seconds to a minute. Do you think you're going to break out the checklist and be like, all right? No, that's where a flow comes in. All right, and you should have a troubleshooting flow down, which is usually the reverse L. So fuel selector valves on both. Make sure you can just go through the list. Fuel selector, make sure that fuel valve is in and not out. Go to your mixture, make sure your mixture wasn't pulled out all the way, or make sure it's not too rich or whatever. And then you go to the left and you're checking everything in the system. That should take place like this. Boom, 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 boom. That's called a flow. If you have time, then you could move to your checklist. So what he does here is he's a newer pilot, and this panic, I talk about flows all day. Airspeed, blast place, land, checklist. That is easier said than done. When you are in a situation like this and adrenaline hits your system and that part of your lizard brain activates where it just wants to survive, it is crucial that you have that muscle memory down. Absolutely crucial that you have this muscle memory down. So let's go ahead and break this down step by step of what he actually did. So the first thing that he does is he's basically right here, he's trying to figure out, did this actually just happen? Am I actually losing engine power? So he starts pumping the throttle, checking his carb heat. I'm imagining that he's suspecting carb heat because he's in a sweater, so it's probably cold out. Or sorry, carb icing. I can't see a date of when this was posted. He immediately goes to the squawk. I'm not super big on throwing in the squawk that quick. Like I said, airspeed, blast place to land, checklist. If you have time, then you can go to 121.5 and squawk 7700. But at this point, he's just trying to figure out. I don't think it was the wrong answer, but priorities should be, ABCs. But no, I think this is when his training starts to kick in right here and he realizes he's in a full-blown emergency. Because your first priority should be flying the plane. And he pitches for best glide here, which is perfect. And now he's looking for a best place to land, all right? He did some troubleshooting, and now he's going into a field, all right? And this looks like a nice field. It looks like it's flat. It doesn't look like there's any hills or anything. He's still trying to troubleshoot. And now he's going into his flow, which he's checking the fuel selector valve. He's checking to make sure that his mixture didn't come out or it wasn't too lean or something. He's checking to make sure that his mags were on both. Now he starts troubleshooting. This is good. And this is hard because he doesn't have a lot of time. And then the engine starts up probably 400 feet. I mean, look at these trees right here. He's probably 400 feet above the ground, 500 feet above the ground. He is maybe 20 seconds away from actually going down. So yeah, he gets the engine started back up again and he makes it back to the runway. Nothing really else happens right here, but he has a pretty good landing. The tower helps him out. He declares an emergency. He communicates clearly with the tower. He declares his intentions, and he's like, I need this now. I need to land on this runway. I have an emergency. My power plant just went out. I got it back started. My point in saying that is that when communicating with ATC, you need to be extremely clear, and you need to tell them what you need. Don't be like, oh, if I could get this, that would be really nice. No, it's like, you just declared an emergency, you get priority over all of other traffic, and you need to tell them what you need, and they will part heaven and hell in order to get you back to the runway safely, okay? Let's watch his landing, because why not? Not bad. All right, so this is what he said. Very exciting experience. Glad all my training kicked in and was able to safely handle the situation. I'm still a student pilot with 54 hours and will be taking my check ride soon. That is an insane experience to have as a student pilot. I've actually, we'll go over some videos later, but I actually have seen some videos of student pilots who are on their solo and they have to put it down in a field or on the road or something like that. So pretty crazy. And then this is what he says that actually happened, and we'll talk about how to prevent this from happening to you. And we'll kind of talk about how I think he handled the situation. And I would like you guys to post below how you think he handled the situation and if he could have done it better, how he did overall. But once I parked the Cessna, I got with the owner and mechanic. Although I had checked on my pre-flight, it was found that water had gotten into the engine and temporarily shut it down. Just glad I got it started back up. Thanks for watching. So yeah, water in the engine, guys, it's no joke. And I talked to this guy, Jason, and he said that he sumped the aircraft and he made sure that there was no water in the wings and he didn't detect any. And that he ended up finding out that the gas cap was bad, and then water ended up getting into the fuel system via most likely the broken gas cap. I mean, at this point, it's pretty, they don't really know what happened, it sounds like, but that was their suspicion, was that a broken gas cap and water snuck into the system. And water into your fuel system is really, really insidious, and the engine does not like to burn water at all. So yeah, I'm not saying he didn't sump it. I'm just saying that when you guys do your pre-checks, I noticed that one of the, like when I'm watching my students sometimes doing pre-checks because I'm like bored or something, I'll just be sitting there and I'm like, you better sump it. You better sump it. Okay, good, you sumped it. Because there was this thing going around the schools in the valley where sumping apparently like wasn't a big deal, or it wasn't even like mentioned or something, even though it's on the checklist. And then people weren't sumping. And I remember this accident happened where 2 people were killed because water got in their engine. They had an engine out and they crashed and died. And then the NTSB concluded that had they have actually sumped the fuel, the tanks, and they detected that water, which they may have, that they would still be here today. And I never forgot that lesson. That's why I love doing and watching accident analysis videos, because I learned so much from that. Okay, so let me just tell you what I think, how I think he handled this. I think he handled this really, really great, honestly. You don't have a lot of time, all right? You don't have a lot of altitude. Catches you completely off guard. You had little to no warning, if any warning at all. You were only a 54-hour student, Jason. 54 hours. That's not a lot of time at all. You're still pretty much brand new. I think you handled this better than like most CFIs probably would have, to be honest. Actually, I don't know about that, but you just handled this spectacularly. I think really what saved you was that you were just so calm and cool and collect. Like you weren't screaming, you weren't freaking out. You were kind of just locked in. And yeah, you had a general flow already down. It looks like you had some muscle memory in there, which is good. I think that saved you overall. And you got lucky with the engine starting again. But this is one of those situations where I can look at this and I would say that you did better all right. I would say better than all right. I would say you did phenomenal. Like I said, you got back in one piece. You're alive. You're still here, uninjured, and the plane is still flying today, maybe. So good job overall. I think you handled this really well. And I think you stayed calm, cool, and collect, considering the situation you're in. And that's really impressive because you were this close to putting it down in a field. And I like that flow that you incorporated in there. Like I said, I'm not saying that squawking 7700 isn't important. I just think that on a level of priority, you have to think of what needs to happen first, and that's where the ABCs come in. So what I tell my students is run through your ABCs, and then if you have time and you can do it quickly and it's not going to take away from more pertinent tasks, then you could squawk 7700, declare your emergency. That's usually like one of the last things I do, because remember, we want to fly the plane first, we want to navigate, and then we can start communication, okay? So going into 7700 kind of just goes into communication first when you should be focused on flying the plane first, which you did. This has all happened very quickly. I'm actually really impressed. And you had that best glide down quick. I saw you get that trim in there, 68, and you held that. I was looking at your airspeed, and you held that trim with that pitch attitude the entire time. Barely fluctuated off of 60. So yeah, that VG was held super well. So yeah, let's go ahead and read this real quick about sumping your fuel tank. So if you guys don't know what having water in your fuel system looks like, I mean, this is insane. You'll never really see it look this dramatic, but you can see how the water is settled on the bottom and the fuel is settled on the top. Okay, that's because the water is more dense, so it's going to be at the bottom. It's really easy to see, even like small little droplets you'll see at the bottom. But you cannot, I mean, if this guy took off with this, he would be a goner. There's no way. That engine would be done like that. But there's, if you look at this, for example, and you see a little bit of moisture in there, that's still a red flag, in my opinion. I would talk to a mechanic about it. But if I saw this type of moisture, which looks like there's some condensation, and I wish they would have got a more zoomed out picture, but yeah, generally when this happens, like you should not be flying with this at all. So even something as small as this, that could indicate a bigger problem. But yeah, and then there's this really good aviation.com Substack that I saw, or Stack Exchange. And this guy asked the question of, why is water in the fuel tank bad? And I want to add every video, or end every video with like a lesson and a takeaway. So I would say this is your takeaway. Why is water in the fuel tank bad? Fuel systems are generally fed by gravity, at least until the fuel leaves the tank, where sometimes, always if the tank is lower than the engine, a pump pushes it towards the engine. This means that fuel is generally extracted from the bottom of the tank or slightly above at the very bottom to avoid having small particulates from the bottom of the tank clogging up the fuel filter. Incidentally, this also introduces the concept of usable fuel as the stuff remaining at the bottom of the tank, although there are more factors included in this. I said that right earlier. Fuel is less dense than water, meaning it'll float on top, which we saw in that picture. Or if you want to think of it the other way around, water is heavier and will sink to the bottom. That's why you always want to look at the bottom of the sump to see if you can see little driplets of water down there. Right where you're trying to get your fuel to feed into the engine. Water doesn't burn very well and the engine will stop. Avgas is generally 0.72 and jet fuel is around 0.82, water being 1. And see the SI units work well that way. A tiny amount of water probably mix with the fuel and simply will reduce power output slightly, meaning that if you just have a little bit of water in there, he's saying that it will just reduce your power a little bit, whereas anything more will be drained from the tank first and it'll be very hard to restart the engine. You'd have to pump all the water through the cylinders and out the exhaust. I don't think this is generally possible in flight, especially right after takeoff, which is generally the case when you have water in the fuel. Could be right after switching the tanks too. Anyways, he says, I don't know much about turbine engines, but I suspect they're less susceptible as the water will not prevent relighting the engine. The pumps will simply push the water out. There's no cylinder that could be fed, fill up the water. So yeah, this guy answers it pretty well, I think, but I'd like to hear you guys' input about fuel in the systems. If you guys have ever encountered this before, how you guys prevent this to happening. Some people say that they go even further and they sump more things. Oh, the other problem with water contamination is that it can freeze the lines at high altitude, effectively blocking the fuel lines with ice and preventing the fuel from getting through. Fuel treatments such as liquid engineering fuel set are recommended to prevent water from settling in fuel. So assuming you even get up that high and your engine hasn't failed beforehand, if you have water in the fuel system, he's saying that at a certain altitude, it could possibly freeze, even though if water is freezing in your fuel lines up that high, you'd have to be climbing forever. So I'm like, the chances of that happening are pretty slim. But yeah, just double check your fuel systems, sump your wings, and I think this is a good lesson to be had, and I really appreciate Jason for sending us this video. And dude, I think you did a good job, and I think most of the people here are going to agree with that. So yeah, what do you guys think? How did he handle this? What could he have done better? What are you impressed by? Have you ever had a situation like this? I want to hear you guys' thoughts. All right, I'll see you.